They pulled out of Gaza. They pulled out in terms of negotiating. It was too bad. Hamas didn't really want to make a deal. I think they want to die, and it's very, very bad.
Are you done with
and it got to be to a point where you're going to have to finish the job. They really, they asked for things. Don't forget, we got a lot of hostages out. So now we're down to the final hostages, and they know what happens after you get the final hostages. And basically, because of that, they really didn't want to make a deal. I saw that. So they pulled out, and they're going to have to fight, and they're going to have to clean it up. You're going to have to get rid of it.
All right. What's going on with my camera here, people? Hey, how you doing? Chuck Holton here. We'll go like that for the time being and figure out what's wrong with my camera, my other camera. Let's see, I have to reset it, I think. No, I don't know. Don't know what's wrong with it. Hey, good to see you. Thank you for being on with us today here on CBN News. I am still in Jerusalem, and I'm very small. All of a sudden, why am I very small? That's weird. Okay. My camera is being weird today. All of a sudden, I don't know what it's doing. So I am still in Jerusalem. I'll be here for a few more days, and we've got a lot of stuff happening, of course, and not just happening here, but happening all around the world. So I'm not exactly sure what comes next in terms of my reporting. I'm going to go from here to Armenia and spend a few days there with hopefully my new grandbaby, which is coming any day now. And we'll enjoy some good memories with my kids and their kids and my wife. And then from there, boy, it's up in the air. I might go to Ukraine. I might go to Thailand, and I might go to somewhere else, which we'll keep a secret for now. But anyhow, thank you for being on with us. Please post in the chat where you're watching from. That is fun to see, and it helps tell YouTube, hey, more people need to watch this. So, yeah, what's going on down there? Now, yesterday, many of you may have seen that I got a chance to go to Gaza. Finally, after 100 and what was it? What are we on day now? 600 and something. And so I know there's a lot of people trying to get out of Gaza, but I've been trying to get in, and finally got invited to go in with the IDF because they're trying to counter this narrative that's coming out about everybody's starving in Gaza. Now, you just heard President Trump talking about, wow, Hamas really doesn't want a ceasefire. Hamas apparently doesn't want to give up the rest of their hostages because they know what will happen if they do. Well, if he just figured that out, that's a little worrisome, because anybody that's been following Hamas at all in the last, I don't know, 35 years or something, knows that Hamas is, they're zealous, they're radical, they're fanatical, and they believe right now they are winning. So they don't have any reason to give up because they think they're winning. I talked about this on last night's live over on my channel, but this is crazy. Like, they are having their own fighters wiped out in droves, could be up to 100 a day, militant fighters that they're losing. of course, the people of Gaza are suffering, and there are people dying in Gaza as well. Hamas has had all of its leadership wiped out, and yet somehow they still think they're winning. Why? Because they're still around. There is still some remnant of Hamas, and that's, Israel's goals are to wipe out Hamas and get their hostages back. Pretty simple and straightforward. Hamas's goals are even simpler. Just survive. If there are 2 or 3 Hamas fighters left when this thing is over, Hamas is still an entity and they will have survived. And they don't care one whit if 10,000, 100,000, or 1 million Gazans have to die in the process. They don't see that as a problem. They are part of a death cult, so they worship death. And death is great as far as they're concerned. Now, strangely, even though the jihadis welcome death, when Israel obliges them and helps them get there, arranges the meeting between them and Allah, and it won't be Allah that they'll be meeting up there. It'll be the Most High Sovereign God of the universe, not the demon that they worship that they call Allah. But when Israel arranges the meeting, the whole world comes down on Israel and says, Israel is wrong for prosecuting this war to its fullest and trying to get their hostages back. So I know I talked about this last night on my live, but I wanted to do it on CBN because I wanted people to get a chance to kind of hear this and see a bunch of videos that I collected from inside Gaza. So you're going to want to stick around because I'm going to show you about 8 or 10 minutes of video from inside Gaza that's filmed by people whose intention is to make the world believe that everybody's starving in Gaza. But we're going to read between the lines a little bit, and we're going to take a look at these videos with a critical eye, let's say, and we're going to find out just how hungry people in Gaza really are. Okay, so let's get to that. Let's start in on that. I got to go over here to my, let's see, we did Trump. And we did oh man, I can't see tonight. My eyes are bothering me. Yeah, here we go. Starving Gazins. Let's take a look. Let's transition to that. What happened to my, oh, okay. Never mind. Hang on, let me fix that. Okay. Starving Gazins. And take that off. Go over here, and there's no starving Gazans. So what's going on with that? Man, producing this a 1-hour TV show, essentially, by yourself is pretty daunting. It's pretty difficult. It's not as easy as it looks. Let's see where that video went. There it is. Okay. There we go. All right. Now, look at these kids. They're all clamoring with their pots for some soup in the soup line. But I want you to take a look at these people. Now, you've probably seen videos of people who are actually starving to death. They get all, their cheeks get all sunken. They start to lose their hair. Even their teeth might fall out. They get distended bellies, all that kind of thing. Ask yourself, if these kids look like those ones in Ethiopia that you saw when there was a famine down there. Okay, take a look at these men here, these adults. They're all clamoring for, now, funnily enough, this video was filmed trying to put out the message that there's no food in Gaza, but the video is of them feeding people in Gaza. So it doesn't look super appetizing, but they have about 20 giant kettles of soup there. And look, people look all downtrodden, and I would be too. And I'm not trying to be to make light of what they're going through, because they are suffering, and I have no doubt they're even hungry. But they're not dying of hunger. None of these kids are starving to death. I mean, they're starving to death in the way that your teenager says that he's starving to death when you know, he hasn't eaten in 4 hours. These kids, look, they're not obese. You wouldn't expect kids to be obese in Gaza because they run around outside all the time. They didn't look much different before the war started. So the UN claims that Israel has been starving Gaza by not allowing aid to get into the people. And what Israel did yesterday is they put that to the lie. They showed what a lie that is. And so I'm going to let you listen to the colonel from Kogat, who we interviewed yesterday when I was in Gaza. Take a listen.
I'm Colonel Col Khalabi, the head of the CLA Gaza. We are currently on the Palestinian side of Shalom Crossing. At this very moment, as you can see behind me, there are over 800 trucks of humanitarian aid that have entered Gaza and waiting for collection and distribution by the United Nations and the aid organizations to the residents of Gaza. We have operated to increase the numbers of trucks, extended the operating hours of crossings, coordinated the new roads for aid collection, and opened additional crossing. And yet, the aid is still waiting to be collected by international aid organizations. I want to emphasize, Israel does not limit the number of trucks entering the Gaza Strip, and it is the collection issue that is preventing continuous delivery of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Despite the clear facts you can see behind me, Hamas is running a deliberate and false propaganda campaign that presents a distorted picture of the humanitarian situation, not out of concern for Gazian residents, but as a pressure tactic in the framework of the negotiations. We operate every day to bring in aid. Hamas operates every day to create a perception of crisis. The international community needs to know the truth. We are working in close coordination with the United Nations and aid organizations, urging them to continue arriving to collect the aid and bring it into the Gaza Strip. The IDF, through Kogat and the CLA Gaza, will continue to do everything to ease the process, improve conditions on the ground, and help find solutions to enable and rapid, orderly, and safe collection for aid, for the benefit of the civilian population in Gaza, not Hamas.
Testing, 1, 2. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So their intention is to the IDF wants to allow as much aid into Gaza as possible. Now, they do inspect it to keep from allowing weapons or something like that to be smuggled in. They actually capture a lot of contraband that's coming in from Egypt over the border in drones. They have found, I mean, we're talking about rifles and explosives and all sorts of stuff that is being brought across the border. And Israel shoots down the drones or captures them and then picks that stuff up. But it is happening. There are lots of attempts to get more weapons into Hamas. Now, who is doing that? Well, I think you could say Iran is involved. We just found out today that Iran just transferred in the last month $100 million to Hamas through Turkey. And they managed to get around the sanctions and the sort of embargo against Gaza to do that. So Hamas, like I say, they're still getting paid by Iran. They don't care about their people. So, and they love it to see these scenes of people looking all hungry and, oh gosh, we're starving, we can't get any food. They love that. That is winning to Hamas. And I don't think there's any other way to put it. I mean, that's exactly what they are looking for. That's the reason that they are pushing news outlets around the world to report on the hunger, the famine that's going on in Gaza. But it's not true. What we heard right there from that IDF colonel was that there are over 1,000 truckloads of aid waiting inside Gaza that we went to see yesterday for somebody to come and distribute it. Now, GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation run by the American company, is distributing some of that food. Some of the food that comes in there was marked with, their boxes marked with GHF on them. Each box carries enough food for a week for one family. And they come in and get them with trucks, and they transport them to their distribution centers, and they pass them out every day. And more comes in the next day, and it's constant flow. But all the other food that's there, hundreds and hundreds of truckloads of food, the UN, it belongs to the UN, it belongs to the World Central Kitchen, it belongs to some other NGOs, and they just refuse to distribute it. And the question you have to ask is why? Like, if they're so concerned about hunger in Gaza, then why not find a way to get that food to the people? The people who typically transport that food into the distribution centers run by the UN are Palestinians. Some of them are Hamas. The United Nations has been complaining that even their own employees in Gaza are starving. And that's a little awkward because their own employees, many of them are Hamas or Hamas affiliated. There were over a dozen UN employees that participated in October 7th. So if it's like, well, the UN doesn't want to distribute this aid, so the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation said yesterday, okay, we will deliver that aid for you. If you're so concerned about getting that aid to the people, let us carry it into Gaza and we will distribute it. And the UN said, no, we're not going to allow that. We won't work with GHF or the IDF. And at some point, it becomes very obvious. The UN wants more to hurt Israel politically than they want to feed people in Gaza. They don't care about the people in Gaza. And that's why the IDF troops that I talked to yesterday, every one of them said, you know, Gaza and the Hamas and the UN are essentially joined at the hip at this point. The UN would rather take that aid into Gaza and give it to Hamas so that Hamas can jack up the prices and sell it to the people than distribute the aid to the people directly. That's what the UN wants to do. And it's not like other NGOs can go, well, then we'll do it instead, because the UN says any NGO that works with GHF or the IDF can never do any work with the UN ever again. And the UN holds the purse strings for a lot of humanitarian aid around the world. So these big organizations, I don't care if it's like Samaritan's Purse or Operation Blessing through CBN or anything like that. We do a lot of work in war zones and disaster areas around the globe, handing out aid to people who need it. And very often, it's the same group of people that are there that were at the last disaster. And you've got NGOs, the United Nations, governments, all working together to try to get aid to where it's needed. So, for example, very often when I go to a disaster, let's say it's a hurricane or something, and I show up to report on it, but CBN also has like the 9th largest charity in the United States, Operation Blessing, and those guys are there on the ground handing out aid. So one of my stories typically is to go cover what Operation Blessing is doing to help people get the aid they need. Operation Blessing might have, let's say they have $1 million budget for this particular disaster. They won't necessarily just go buy $1 million worth of toilet paper or something and then just pass it out to the people and be done. Instead, what they've learned to do is they will go to, they'll go and rent a bunch of trucks with their $1 million and then take the trucks around to other NGOs and say, hey, if you need transport, we'll help you transport your products into the disaster area. Maybe they'll go to Sam's Club. I've done that before with them. And Sam's Club will donate like $30,000 worth of food. So then Operation Blessing puts it on a truck and drives it into the people who need it. In that way, we can multiply the aid that people give to Operation Blessing. So that $1 million might end up translating to $5 million or $10 million worth of actual aid that gets to people, because we're just helping people who, there's lots of generous people out there. We're just helping them get the aid to where it needs to go. Okay, so if, for just the sake of argument, Operation Blessing decided, you know what, we're going to bypass the UN and we're going to just work with GHF in Gaza. We're going to send food in there and get food to the people. The United Nations has put out the word that if that happens, they will never work with Operation Blessing ever again. So they've scared off a bunch of smaller NGOs who rely on working that relationship with the United Nations for their very existence. And that right there ought to tell you a lot about the state of the state of humanitarian aid and development across the globe. This is an industry. Aid is a self-perpetuating industry. And it's not, I'm not saying that the people that work in these aid organizations don't care about the people they're serving. Most of them probably do. However, they have got to make a paycheck. And so what we see and what we have learned over decades of this kind of aid and development is that the process that we've created for giving out aid actually makes it more likely that people are going to stay in dependency and not really get out of the hole that they're in. They will just become dependent on that aid, and that dependency will grow and grow and grow like a cancer, which does not help people in the long run. That's why I highly recommend, if you give to any aid organization at all, if you do any charitable giving, you should read the book that's titled When Helping Hurts. When Helping Hurts. That book talks about that people have needs in or relationships in 4 directions. They have a relationship with themselves and a relationship with their God. And they have a relationship with their community, and they have a relationship with their environment. When people are destitute because of a disaster or whatever, a war, doesn't matter, some of those relationships have gotten broken. And when you come in and hand out aid to people, you have to be careful to do it in such a way that you don't further damage some of those relationships. So you don't, for example, come in and provide for these people in this area, and then when you're gone, they find themselves in need again, and they go to their neighbor, and their neighbor says, why don't you go to your gringo friends and ask for money? Well, we're not going to help you. So we've sort of destroyed the fabric of their society by coming in and giving out a bunch of free stuff. I've seen it where church groups will come in and bring 30 duffel bags full of used clothing, like Goodwill type stuff, and then go on a mission trip to our little town in Panama, pass out all that clothing, just give it away for free to all the poor little brown people. Well, you know, there's only one clothing store in our little town. And when a group comes in and does something like that, that clothing store has a hard time not going out of business, because we just took all the business that they would have gotten for the month by giving away all those clothes. So it's very, very easy to do more harm than good when you're giving away aid. And that's why we have to be careful about how we do it. Now, I want to show you another little stand-up that I did while I was in Gaza yesterday. Take a look at this.
The Shalom Crossing is Gaza's key supply artery to get food to the people. And they have a capacity that can handle 500 trucks a day. Now, Israel is allowing many trucks through every day into Gaza. But right here is the choke point. This food needs to get picked up and taken out to distribution centers inside Gaza. And the United Nations was responsible for doing that, but now they are refusing to do so, not because the people don't need it, but because they would rather bash Israel than feed the hungry.
Okay, so that was what I saw yesterday in Gaza. And what the IDF is trying to do is just counter this narrative that is going around the world, being picked up gladly, just lapped up by the media, that people are starving in Gaza. And again, we go down to the starving people in Gaza, and I'm just fast forward through some of this a little bit. I mean, look at this. Again, ask yourself, read between the lines, do these people look like they're dying of hunger? What you're seeing is a feeding center in Gaza. That girl doesn't look like she's starving. She might be hungry. She might not have as much food as she would like, but she's not starving to death. There's a bunch of military-age males right there, probably some Hamas fighters in civilian clothes. And they look well and vigorous. But these kinds of images are staged. They're absolutely staged. And look, they're trying to make the case that they're all starving to death while they are feeding the people. They are getting fed. So I think that is the best way to kind of help you understand that this is a manufactured crisis. I'm not saying that there are not people who are hungry in Gaza. There certainly are. And the people in Gaza are not getting, they're not able to provide for themselves, which makes you think, why are they still in Gaza? I mean, why, if they're given the opportunity to leave, wouldn't everybody leave and go somewhere where you can actually make a living? And the answer is because it actually was okay in Gaza before the war. It was a beautiful place. So even now in Gaza, there are restaurants that are still open. There are bakeries that are still open. There are markets that are still open. That is not what it looks like when people are starving to death. I've been to the places where people are where there's actual famine, and I can tell you that this is far different. Okay, so that's all I've got to say on that topic. Now, I just want to encourage you. I'm going to go over right now to my channel, The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton here on YouTube, and I'm going to do live over there and answer your questions. So any questions that have been asked in this live will get translated over there, and we're going to talk about what's going on in Iran. There's a bunch of sabotage happening, and today I made a chilling discovery. I uncovered some proof that U.S. troops are actually training the forces of Ahmed al-Sharaa in Syria. So you're not going to want to miss that. So thank you very much for watching. Please donate to CBN, keep us on the air, and make sure you go over to the Hot Zone with Chuck Holton right now. So in just a couple minutes, I'll be online.